This first story comes from a hiker named Ryan, who posted about his experience on a survival forum back in 2015. He was in his late 20s, an experienced outdoorsman who often went on solo trips to challenge himself. That summer, he decided to trek through the vast wilderness of Yellowstone National Park, planning a 3-day hike off the main trails. The area was known for its rugged terrain, dense forests, steep ravines, and spots where cell service dropped to nothing. Ryan had done his research, mapping out a route that would take him through some of the park's most untouched areas, places where you could go days without seeing another person. He packed light, a one-man tent, dehydrated meals, a water filter, a detailed map, and a reliable compass. As he drove to the trailhead, the excitement built. He loved the feeling of leaving civilization behind, stepping into a world where nature ruled. The sun was shining bright that morning. Birds were singing overhead, and the air carried that fresh, earthy scent of pine trees and wild grass. But deep down, Ryan knew the wilderness could turn on you, especially at night, when the darkness swallowed everything. He started his hike around noon, the path winding through meadows dotted with wildflowers before dipping into thicker woods. The trail was narrow, overgrown in places, with roots poking up like hidden traps. By late afternoon, after several hours of steady walking, his legs were starting to feel the burn, but he pressed on, enjoying the solitude. He found a small clearing to set up camp as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The spot was perfect. Flat ground, a nearby stream for water, and tall pines encircling it like silent guardians. Ryan pitched his tent, gathered some dry wood, and started a small fire. The flames crackled to life, sending up sparks that danced in the cooling air. He boiled some water for tea, ate a protein bar, and leaned back against a log, listening to the sounds of the forest. Leaves gently rustling in the breeze, a distant owl hooting, and the faint trickle of the stream. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that made you feel small but alive. As dusk settled in, the shadows grew longer, stretching across the ground like fingers reaching out from the trees. Ryan added more wood to the fire, watching the embers glow, and felt a slight chill creep in. The temperature always dropped fast out here once the sun was gone. Around 9 p.m., with full darkness enveloping the camp, Ryan decided to call it a night. He doused the fire until it was just smoldering coals, crawled into his tent, and zipped up the flap. Inside, it was cozy but confined, the nylon walls rustling slightly with every gust of wind. He slipped into his sleeping bag, the material crinkling as he adjusted, and closed his eyes, letting the day's fatigue wash over him. The forest sounds continued outside, crickets chirping faintly, branches creaking, but they were comforting, a natural lullaby. For a while, he drifted in and out of light sleep, his mind replaying the hike's highlights. It started subtly, around midnight. Ryan woke with a start, his heart already beating a little faster than normal. At first, he wasn't sure what had pulled him from sleep, but then he heard it. Footsteps crunching on the dry leaves and pine needles around his camp. They were slow, deliberate, like someone or something walking with purpose, circling the clearing. He lay perfectly still, straining his ears, telling himself it was probably just a deer or maybe a bear foraging for food. Animals were common out here, and he'd encountered them before without issue. But these steps sounded different. Too rhythmic, too measured, almost like a person pacing. The crunching continued, getting a bit closer with each loop, the leaves compressing under some weight. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He reached slowly for his flashlight, trying not to make any noise. Clicking it on low, he shone the beam. through the mesh window of the tent, but it only illuminated a small patch of ground. Empty, just scattered twigs and dirt. The footsteps paused for a moment, as if whatever it was had noticed the light, then resumed, now on the other side of the tent. His mind raced. Was it another hiker? Someone lost or maybe up to no good? Poachers weren't unheard of in these parts. "Hello?" he called out softly, his voice sounding small and echoey in the vast night. No answer came, just the continued crunching, now accompanied by the occasional snap of a small branch. Ryan's skin prickled with goosebumps, the chill inside the tent, feeling deeper than just the temperature. He gripped his multi-tool knife, flipping out the blade, and sat up, listening intently. The steps seemed to be testing the perimeter, stopping every now and then as if listening back. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the tension building like a coil tightening in his chest. He thought about unzipping the tent and confronting whatever it was, but the darkness outside was absolute, a black void that could hide anything. Around 2 a.m., the sounds evolved. The footsteps grew bolder, closer, and now there was breathing. Heavy, labored breaths that rasped like someone out of breath or in pain. It was right outside the tent wall, so close Ryan could almost feel the warmth through the fabric. His heart hammered, sweat forming on his brow despite the cold air seeping in. Then, something pressed against the side of the tent, deforming the nylon inward, like a hand or a paw, pushing firmly but not breaking through. The pressure held for a long moment, as if testing the material's strength. "Who's there?" Ryan whispered, again, his voice trembling now, knife raised. The pressure suddenly released, and the footsteps retreated a few paces, but they didn't leave. Instead, they paced back and forth just beyond where the fire had been, the breathing continuing in uneven bursts, Ryan's mind filled with worst-case scenarios. A predator stalking him, or worse, a person with bad intentions. He didn't dare move, frozen in place, every sense heightened. The smell of damp earth mixing with his own fierce sweat, the faint glow of his flashlight casting eerie shadows inside the tent. As the night wore on, the disturbances didn't let up. Every time Ryan thought it might be over, the footsteps would start again, sometimes accompanied by low rustles in the underbrush, like something brushing against bushes. He checked his watch obsessively, willing the hours to pass until dawn. Exhaustion battled with adrenaline, his eyes heavy but his body wired. Around 3 a.m., a new sound joined in. A soft whispering, too faint to make out words, but it sounded human, murmuring just at the edge of hearing. It sent a shiver down his spine, the kind of cold that settles deep in your bones. He turned off the light to conserve battery, plunging himself into total darkness, which only amplified the noises. The whispering seemed to circle with the steps, growing slightly louder, almost like it was calling to him. Finally, as the first hints of gray light filtered through the trees, the sounds faded. Ryan waited until he could see clearly before emerging, his body stiff from tension. The clearing looked undisturbed at first glance, but as he inspected the ground, he saw them. Footprints, large and boot-like, circling his tent multiple times, leading off into the woods. They didn't match his own shoes, and there were no animal tracks mixed in. Shaken, he packed up quickly, eager to put distance between himself and the spot. But as he hiked, the feeling of being watched persisted. He'd catch glimpses of movement. In the corner of his eye, shadows flitting between trees, gone when he turned. The trail, which had been clear yesterday, now seemed twisted, markers harder to spot. His compass, usually reliable, began acting strange, the needle jittering instead of pointing steadily north. By midday, he realized he was lost. The landscape unfamiliar, ravines appearing where his map showed flat ground. Panic rose, his throat dry, legs heavy from the sleepless night. He stopped to drink from his canteen, the water tasting metallic with his fear. Pushing on, the footsteps returned even in daylight, faint but unmistakable. Always just behind or to the side, out of sight. Ryan quickened his pace, heart racing, branches scratching his arms as he pushed through thicker sections. The whispers came back too, clearer now. His name, Ryan. Ryan. In a voice that sounded eerily like his own, echoing through the trees, he ran then, blind panic taking over, the forest blurring around him, thorns tearing at his clothes, the air thick with the scent of crushed leaves and sweat. Evening fell too soon, the light fading fast, and he was forced to set up camp again, in a hasty spot, building a large fire for protection. The flames roared, but the whispers surrounded him, mimicking his own voice calling for help, pleading. Then, in the flickering light, he saw it. A figure at the tree line, tall and unnaturally thin, its skin pale and bark-like, eyes reflecting the fire's glow like an animal's. It didn't move, just watched, sending waves of dread through him. After a sleepless night stalked by a vanishing figure, Ryan reached a ranger station. His compass worked, and rangers blamed fatigue and anomalies. Weeks later, whispers haunt his apartment, and photos show the same tall shadow. Friends call it a trick of light, but he knows it followed him. He won't hike alone and still feels watched. Our second story is from a couple, Lisa and Mark, who shared this on a podcast in 2019. They were city folks from Toronto, used to the hustle of urban life, but they wanted a change, a romantic getaway to reconnect in the remote wilderness of the Canadian Rockies. It was early fall when the leaves turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the air was crisp with the promise of cooler weather. They found a small rental cabin online, tucked deep in the woods, accessible only by a winding dirt road that twisted through valleys and over streams. The listing promised seclusion, with no neighbors for miles, just endless trees, a small lake nearby, and starry skies at night. Lisa was excited about the coziness, picturing evenings by the fire. Mark looked forward to hiking and fishing. They packed warm clothes, some wine, fresh food for cooking, and drove out, the road getting bumpier as they left civilization behind. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and as they arrived in the late afternoon, the cabin looked charming. Log walls, a stone chimney, and a porch overlooking the lake, which reflected the colorful foliage like a mirror. They unloaded the car, exploring the place. The interior was simple but inviting. A living area with a plush couch, a kitchenette, and a bedroom with a big window facing the woods. Mark got the wood stove going, the crackle of flames filling the space with warmth, and the comforting scent of burning logs. Lisa prepared a simple dinner, pasta and salad, and they ate by candlelight, talking about their lives, laughing over old memories. It felt perfect, like they'd escaped the world. As the sun set, painting the sky in deep purples, they stepped out on the porch to watch. The lake still and silent, the forest darkening around them. A light fog began to roll in from the water, common in the mountains, softening the edges of the trees. They headed back inside around 9 p.m., the temperature dropping sharply, and settled in for the night, the stove's heat warding off the chill. Around 10 p.m., as they were getting ready for bed, the fog thickened outside, pressing against the windows like a blanket, making the glass misty. The wilderness sounds faded. No more bird calls or wind rustling leaves, just an unnatural quiet that made the cabin feel isolated, like it was floating in a void. Lisa mentioned it felt a bit eerie, but Mark brushed it off, saying it was just the weather. They turned off the lights, leaving only the stove's glow, and climbed into bed, the sheets cool at first, but warming quickly. For a while it was peaceful, their breaths sinking in the dark, the occasional pop from the fire the only noise. It began with a knock at the door around midnight. 3 slow, deliberate knocks that echoed through the cabin, cutting through the silence like a knife. Lisa sat up, heart skipping. What was that? Mark, half asleep, mumbled, "Probably a branch or the wind." But it came again, the same 3 knocks, firm and intentional. He got up, pulling on a sweater, and went to the front door, peering through the small peephole. Outside, only swirling fog, no shape or movement. "Nothing there," he said, but his voice had a slight edge. Lisa pulled the blankets tighter, a chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. They tried to settle back, but minutes later, the knocks shifted. To the back door this time. Louder. More. Insistent. Mark grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen, his face tense now, and stepped outside, the door creaking open. "Hello? Anyone out there?" he called. The beam cutting through the fog, but revealing only trees and mist. The cold air rushed in, carrying a damp, musty smell. He scanned around, seeing nothing, but as he turned back, he heard a faint shuffle, like feet on gravel, fading away. Back inside, they bolted both doors, the locks clicking into place with a finality that didn't ease the idrid, growing tension. "Maybe it's an animal," Lisa whispered, but neither believed it. The knocks were too human, too purposeful. They sat up, listening, the stove's fire casting flickering shadows on the walls that seemed to move on their own. Time crawled, every creak of the cabin settling amplified in the quiet. Around 1 a.m., new sounds started. Scratches on the exterior, walls, slow and deliberate, like nails dragging across the wood. It began softly, from one side, then moved to another, as if something was circling the cabin. Lisa's breath came in short gasps, her hands clammy. "Mark, what if someone's out there? Like a drifter or something?" He shook his head, trying to stay calm, but his knuckles were white, gripping the flashlight. The scratches formed patterns, rhythmic, almost like a code, pausing and resuming, the wood groaning under the pressure. The night stretched on, the tension building like a storm. They added more wood to the stove, the heat intense but not enough to shake the icy dread settling in. Around 2 a.m., the power flickered, the overhead light buzzing before going out completely, leaving only the stove's orange glow. The cabin plunged into semi-darkness, shadows deepening in the corners. Then, the whispers started from outside. "Let us in. It's cold." Faint at first, but growing clearer. Multiple voices overlapping in a haunting chorus. Lisa's eyes widened, tears welling up. "Did you hear that?" Mark nodded, shining the flashlight out the window, the beam trembling. For a split second, it caught something. Pale faces in the fog, gaunt and hollow-eyed, staring back with desperate expressions. They vanished as quickly as they appeared, leaving only swirling mist. The knocks returned, turning to pounding, the whole cabin shaking with each blow, doors rattling in their frames. Lisa cried softly, "We need to leave, Mark, please." But the fog was so thick they couldn't see the car, let alone drive. They huddled together on the couch, hearts pounding, the air inside turning unnaturally cold, their breaths visible despite the fire. The pounding and whispers continued in waves, escalating, the voices pleading, "Warmth, let us in." Mark Toider tried the phone, but no signal. The isolation complete. They endured, whispering reassurances to each other, the fear like a weight pressing down. As dawn approached, the sounds gradually faded, the fog lifting slightly with the light. Exhausted, they packed up and drove out, the road now visible. At the nearest town, they reported it to locals, who shared old tales of trappers who froze to death in those woods during harsh winters, their spirits wandering, seeking shelter from the cold they could never escape. The twist came later, back in their city apartment. On cold nights, they'd hear the knocks at their door, 3 slow ones, even on the 10th floor. Scratches would appear on the walls overnight, and in photos from the trip, foggy shapes outside the cabin resolved into faces when zoomed in. Lisa and Mark never went back to the wilderness, but they feel those lost souls followed them home, forever hungry for the warmth they lost, always knocking, always whispering. This third account is from a park ranger named Elena, who detailed her ordeal in a 2021 blog post. She had been working in the vast wilderness of Alaska's backcountry for years, patrolling remote areas to monitor wildlife, check for poachers, and assist lost hikers. The job suited her. She was tough, independent, and loved the raw beauty of the taiga forests, with their dense evergreens, frozen tundra, and the northern lights dancing in the winter sky. But one particular night shift in late winter changed everything. The air was brutally cold that evening, the kind that stung your lungs with every breath, carrying the sharp scent of snow and pine. Elena geared up at the station, thick parka, snow boots, gloves, and her service radio. She mounted her snowmobile, the engine roaring to life, and headed out into the darkness, her headlamp piercing the night like a single eye. The stars were brilliant overhead, the aurora faintly shimmering in greens and purples, but the isolation was profound. No roads, no lights, just endless white expanse broken by clusters of trees. Her route was a standard loop through old mining trails, places where the ground was still scarred from long abandoned digs. The snowmobile hummed steadily, crunching over fresh powder, the cold wind whipping at her face despite the helmet. She stopped occasionally to scan with binoculars, looking for signs of activity. The silence broken only by the machine's noise. Around 11 p.m., deep in the woods, the engine suddenly sputtered, coughing like it was choking on something, then died completely. Elena cursed under her breath, killing the lights to save battery. "Just a fuel line freeze, probably," she muttered, hopping off to check. But the tank was full, lines clear, no obvious issue. The silence rushed in, absolute and heavy. No wind stirring the branches, no animal sounds, just her own breathing, loud in her ears. She tried the radio. Base. This is Elena, snowmobile down at mile 15, requesting pickup. Static hissed back, the signal gone, which wasn't unusual in these valleys, but still unsettling. She set up a small emergency camp, digging a snow trench for windbreak and starting a fire with her kit, the flames struggling against the cold, crackling, weakly. The temperature was dropping fast, her fingers numb even in gloves. Sitting by the fire, she ate an energy bar, the chocolate tasting bitter with her growing unease. Time passed slowly, the aurora pulsing overhead like a living thing. Then, around midnight, she heard it. Footsteps in the snow, crunching softly, approaching from the tree line. They were light but distinct, like bare feet padding over the crust. Elena grabbed her flashlight, sweeping the beam. Nothing, just endless white and shadows. The The steps continued, circling her position, getting closer. Her heart rate picked up, a knot forming in her stomach. Animals don't walk like that, she thought, standing up, flare gun ready. The footsteps paused, then resumed, now from multiple directions, as if several things were out there. Tension built as the night deepened. She added more fuel to the fire, the warmth a small comfort. But the cold seemed to press in harder. Around 1 a.m., prints began appearing in the snow, materializing in her flashlight beam. Human-sized footprints, but barefoot, toes splayed unnaturally, leading right toward her trench. They stopped just short, as if invisible feet had halted. Elena's breath fogged the air, her hands shaking slightly. "Show yourself!" she shouted, voice echoing off the trees but sounding weak. No response, but then a low moan started, like wind howling through a cave, but pained and human, rising and falling. It came from the darkness, multiplying into several voices, surrounding her. The moans carried a sadness, a desperation that made her skin crawl. As hours ticked by, shadows began moving between the trees. Tall, indistinct forms that blended with the trunks, gliding silently. Elena felt eyes on her, a heavy, oppressive dread weighing down her chest, making it hard to breathe. She radioed again, desperately, but only static. The fire crackled, but the cold intensified, frost forming on her gear despite the flames. The moans evolved into whispers, faint words. Names, actually. Names of hikers who'd gone missing in these woods, cases she'd read in reports. "Join us. Stay with us," they murmured, the voices hollow and echoing. Fear gripped her fully. Now, sweat freezing on her skin, every shadow seeming to reach out. Around 3 a.m., one shadow stepped into the firelight. A figure, emaciated and hunched, skin blue-tinged from cold, clothes tattered rags, eyes milky white like frozen marbles. It reached out a bony hand, moaning her name. "Elena, come." She backed away, tripping into the snow, the flare gun slipping from her glove. The figure dissolved into swirling mist, but more appeared, circling the fire, their whispers drilling into her mind, urging her to give in to the cold. She curled up in the trench, covering her ears, praying for dawn, the night stretching endlessly, her body numb, mind fraying with terror. Rescue arrived at first light, a team on snowmobiles finding her hypothermic but alive. Her machine started. Right up for them, no issues found. They got her to safety. But the twist? Those footprints matched ones from unsolved disappearance cases in the area, barefoot in the snow. Now, on quiet nights at home, Elena hears the moans outside her window, calling her name, the cold seeping in unnaturally. She quit rangering, convinced the wilderness claims souls, trapping them in eternal freeze, and those lost ones are always looking for company, whispering to join them. Our final story comes from a group of friends, Tom, Sarah, Mike, and Jen, who recounted this on a Reddit thread in 2017. They were avid birdwatchers from Seattle, passionate about spotting rare species, and decided to venture into the wilderness of the Amazon rainforest for a night expedition. The Amazon was a dream destination teeming with life, vibrant birds during the day, but at night it came alive with nocturnal creatures like owls and nightjars. They hired a local guide named Carlos, an experienced tracker, and flew in, then took a boat upriver to a remote base camp. The air was humid and thick, smelling of wet earth, blooming flowers, and decaying leaves. The jungle a wall of green vines and towering trees, They set up tents near the river, the water murmuring softly, and spent the first day acclimating, hiking short trails, the heat making them sweat through their clothes. As evening approached, the jungle transformed, the sun setting fast, casting golden light through the canopy before plunging everything into shadow. They geared up with headlamps, binoculars, and recording devices, excited for the night watch. Carlos led them out around 8 p.m., the path narrow and muddy, insects buzzing. Around their lights, the sounds were overwhelming at first, frogs croaking in chorus, distant monkey howls, leaves rustling with unseen movement. They spotted a few birds, Carlos pointing them out quietly, his voice low to not scare them away. The group whispered, excitedly, the humidity clinging to their skin like a second layer. Around 11 p.m., deep in the trails, things took a turn. Carlos was ahead, shining his light on a tree where a rare owl perched. "Look there, quietly," he said. The friends gathered, binoculars raised, but when they lowered them, Carlos was gone, vanished without a sound, his light extinguished. "Carlos," Tom called softly at first, then louder, the group sweeping their headlamps. No trace, no footsteps in the mud, just the jungle closing in. Panic bubbled up, Sarah's voice shaky. "Where did he go? He was right here." They backtracked, calling his name, but the path seemed different, vines hanging lower, as if the forest had shifted. Strange lights appeared in the distance, glowing orbs, not fireflies, bobbing erratically through the trees, emitting a soft, unnatural hum. "What are those?" Sarah whispered, her heart pounding. The group stuck close, headlamps flickering, but the orbs multiplied, drawing nearer, accompanied by rustles in the undergrowth that sounded like footsteps paralleling theirs. A low growl echoed, deep and vibrating, not matching any known animal. More, like a rumble from the earth itself. Mike felt a chill despite the heat. "We need to get back to camp." But directions blurred, the river's sound fading, then reappearing in odd places. Tension escalated as they moved, the orbs herding them, the koham growls growing closer. Branches snagged their clothes, roots tripping them, the air heavy with the sour smell of fear and jungle rot. The orbs revealed shapes within, ethereal figures, translucent, mimicking human forms, one resembling Carlos, beckoning with a silent hand. "It's not real," Jen said, but her voice wavered. Mike tripped, falling hard, and something cold brushed his arm, like icy fingers gripping briefly. "Run!" Tom yelled, and they bolted, lights bouncing wildly, the jungle twisting into loops, bringing them back to the same clearing repeatedly. They huddled together as the night wore on, orbs circling, figures whispering in unknown tongues, the Ai growls shaking the ground. Exhaustion set in, minds playing tricks, shadows seeming to reach out. Dawn finally broke, the orbs fading with the light. Stumbling back to camp, they found Carlos there, calm, claiming he'd never left, that they must have wandered off. Confused and terrified, they left the jungle. The twist? Photos from their cameras showed the orbs with faces inside, resembling long-lost explorers from old records. Now, at night, the friends see flickering lights outside their homes, hear jungle growls in their dreams, and feel cold touches. They believe the wilderness spirits lure the living with mimics, and their guide might have been one all along, leading them into the trap. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.